Tesla just brought back some trims that had been discontinued a long time ago. I think it was back in 2019 or 18 since they had like a standard range Model S and X, but they're back and they're weird. There's a lot of speculating to do here, which is what mainly Tailosive is all about, speculating on things we don't know what we're talking about, which is why this is so much fun for me. So just going over the basic specs, now you can get a standard range Model S for about $77,500. And in case you're wondering why I'm saying 77 and not 78, it's because at least right now anybody can still use a referral code like the one in the description. It's not even mine. I don't care whose you use. Just make sure before you order a Tesla you use somebody's referral code, okay? Because especially with the Model S and X, you still get $1,000 off with that code. So I'm deducting that from the price, which means that finally we have a Model S under $80,000 again, and it's just about $10,000 more for the Model X, now starting at about $87,000. And most people still feel pretty impressed and are surprised that the standard range Model S is still getting 320 miles of range. Like, how many vehicles out there have that as like the standard trim and there's nothing below that one? But a lot more people are disappointed by the Model X standard range, which took a little bit more of a hit than I think most people were expecting. Now, even with the base, most aerodynamic, most efficiency-friendly tires of the Model X, the maximum range is only 269 miles, which is actually lower than my Model 3, which is the cheapest Tesla you can buy. So I guess a lot of people are kind of disappointed by that, like a $90,000 vehicle. And if you spec it with some bigger tires, it actually brings that range down closer to 250. Dangerously low to that Elon Musk figure that said, 250 miles of range is just unacceptably low. Doesn't reach our standard of excellence. Well, now Tesla's selling a $90,000 car with a 250 mile range. Yeah, I can understand why a lot of people think that's a tad too steep, but personally, at least after road tripping in my standard range Model 3 for the past 4,000 miles in the last 3 weeks, I can attest that the maximum range figure, I think, is a little bit overrated in many ways. For one, you typically don't get that range number in the first place, and for two, a lot of people hold all of their weight and value in the final range number, because I think the problem is most people are looking at electric vehicles too much like gas vehicles and are just assuming, well, your range number is, okay, you start with a full tank and then you drive until it's empty, and then when it's empty you gotta recharge it, and how long does it take to charge to full again? And this is just a wrong, backwards way of understanding battery chemistries, how batteries charge, and how the charging network works fundamentally. So like I said, I did thousands of miles of road tripping in basically the lowest range Tesla over the past couple weeks, and I still felt like I was making great time, and I plugged in the same routes with a better route planner and hypothetically configured it so I had the long range Model S with 400 miles of range, and it rarely saved me more than like an hour on, a full day, like 15 hours worth of driving. Honestly, what's going to affect your road trip experience the most is your charging curve and your charging network, and that's the good news about the Model S and X standard range. They basically have very little differences outside of that. Their 0 to 60 took a little bit of a hit. I'm pretty sure this is all entirely software based. Everybody on X keeps posting that, yeah, these are just software locked. There's no different battery chemistry. These are not LFP or anything. I don't see where they're hearing that. I just see people claiming that Tesla confirmed it. I keep going, where did Tesla say explicitly? I guess some people are just listening to sales agents, but those guys have been wrong in the past, so I wouldn't put too much faith in them. But assuming everybody on X is correct, apparently this is the exact same hardware that you get in a long-range Model S and X, and the software is just basically capping these battery packs at around 80%, which of course has a lot of people wondering, wait a minute, does this mean that you can charge the standard range S and X to 100% every single day because you don't have to worry about that degradation? Well, the logic there makes sense, but I still wouldn't completely buy into that theory. I get it. It makes a lot of sense in my head. If you want to cap people at 80%, just let the top 20% be a buffer. That probably prolongs your battery health anyway by not fully charging it, but because these vehicles haven't been delivered yet and there's none allegedly in inventory at this time, and these are future models, I still think there's a few edge hypotheticals that could be a reality. Like, for instance, could these be binned battery packs? Like, are they putting Model S and X battery packs, which are supposed to be 100 kilowatt hours in these things, but maybe they didn't quite hit the yield that Tesla wanted to at the factory, so maybe instead of 100 kilowatt hours, it's a pack that has some bad cells in it, and that means that it only has 90 or 85 kilowatt hours. And as long as Tesla's not promising more than 80 kilowatt hours in these packs, then they're okay to sell them, even though they may have some dummy cells on the inside. I don't know for sure if that's the case. I'm speculating here, but simultaneously there is an off chance. I get that it's weird, but I've seen Tesla make some bizarre and weird decisions in the past. There's a chance that they might put that 20% buffer on the bottom of the battery pack and not at the top, which means if you're charging it to full every single day, you might actually be charging up the real 100% battery pack, and they just don't let you go below that bottom 20%. Or maybe it's somewhere in the middle where they just have a 10% buffer on the bottom and top. Who knows at this point? All I'm trying to say is you should default to whatever the user manual says, and if the software in the car tells you just to charge it to 80% every single day, I honestly think you should listen to that. I don't think you should ignore that and say, yeah, I'm just gonna charge it to full because everyone online keeps claiming that that 20% buffer can't be accessed. We don't know for sure, which is why I'm just saying default to whatever the car recommends. That's what you should believe. That's what you should trust, not a bunch of random people posting things. But the bigger question I think a lot of us are asking is, why would Tesla start selling Model S's and X's with the exact same hardware as the long-range options? You know, that still probably cost Tesla a pretty penny to put a 100 kilowatt-hour pack into these things, paint them, do the whole special interior with the ventilated seats and the extra displays and everything, and then offer to sell those at such a massive discount. Why not just apply a price cut across the board? Well, in my opinion, it's gotta be because the Model S and X are not selling at the volume they had hoped. Lucid has definitely proven that the market for six-figure vehicles right now is not looking too hot. Interest rates aren't that good, and I think it's also coupled with the fact that the Model 3 and Y are just too freaking good a deal. A lot of that, I think, stems from the federal tax credit. The Model 3 and Y both qualify for that, and even with the standard range Model S and X, they still don't qualify for the federal tax credit, which means the price gap between the Y and the X is like massive. You know, you could get a 7-seater long-range Model Y for like $30,000 less than a standard range Model X, and you're gonna get way better range with that Model Y and same amount of seats or more depending on which Model X configuration you go with, and same sort of story with the Model S standard range. Like, yes, okay, it's under $80,000, but the 0 to 60 has been limited to 3.7 seconds, so it's slower than a Model 3 performance, and the Model 3 performance is going to have basically the same range. It'll be faster at a 0 to 60 in 3.1 seconds, and it qualifies for the federal tax credit, so you can save yourself like $25,000 by going with a Model 3 over an S. Sure, I appreciate the tilting display and the rear-mounted display and the driver screen. I appreciate the ventilated seats and all that, but, you know, is the hatchback and all those luxury features worth an extra $25,000, $30,000 to that many people? Probably not. So the Model 3 and Y, I think, are just becoming too good of a deal, and honestly, I think a scenario that might be very real in the future, because Tesla just launched these standard range options. I don't think they're fully set on what they want to price them at. They likely want to see how the market responds to these new tiers. But frankly, if they could get the Model X standard range to start under $80,000, which it's pretty close right now, only $8,000 away, if we just saw like another $10,000 price cut, then suddenly a standard range Model X could qualify for that $7,500 credit, and then a lot more people, I think, would consider buying it because it does have a ton of bells and whistles. And the limit for SUVs on the federal tax credit is $80,000, whereas the Model S, there's very little hope, honestly, because for sedans, the limit is capped at about $55,000, and the Model S would have to have like a $20,000 plus price drop in order to qualify for the federal tax credit. So the Model X, I think, is a lot closer to being a lot more affordable, and of course the SUV market or the crossover market sells at a lot higher volume anyway. But I think Tesla is trying to maintain margins with the S and X as best they can, and this is them just kind of experimenting on the website. I don't think this is going to be the last we see of them. I think there could easily be some more price cuts in the future depending on how many people order these things, and I think at the same time they're also not trying to cannibalize sales too much of the long-range S and X. Clearly they still want to be selling them for that $80,000-$90,000 price point, and they still have a lot of range for people who care about that. Model S with over 400-mile range. Model X has 350-mile range, which is really great. But again, I think a lot of what the Tesla community has found out, and at least what I've experienced with EV road tripping, is that maximum range number doesn't have a huge effect on your road trip time. It comes down to the charging speed, and that's the good news here. The standard range Model S and X, still, they both cap out at 250 kilowatts, which generally speaking, that's really fast, and they can both access the incredible supercharger network and have the NACS connector, no adapter required. So in my opinion, this is just fun. It's like fascinating to see what Tesla is trying to do to make the Model S and X feel like that much better of a deal. You know, last quarter they were doing the 3 years of unlimited free supercharging. Now they're experimenting with software locks, and a lot of people are wondering, in the future, could Tesla sell you a software package to unlock this extra range and turn it into a long range. From my experience, a lot of the time they haven't done that, and at least publicly right now, I guess other people who have contacts at Tesla are stating they have no plans or no intentions on allowing you to upgrade that range in the future, which if they never do, that kind of supports my idea that maybe these are binned battery packs that didn't quite pass the manufacturing yields and they have some dummy cells in them, and that allows Tesla to sell the Model S and X still for a pretty high price with the binned pack. But if it is truly binned, they're not going to let you unlock more range in the future. But if they do see a large surge in orders in the standard range Model S and X, what I do think is another hypothetical scenario that would make a lot of sense is starting to switch those vehicles over to the lithium iron phosphate chemistry. They're already shipping in a bunch of LFP battery packs from China. Project Highland might result in Tesla shipping in more lithium iron manganese phosphate, which means higher energy density. And the Model S and X are overall bigger vehicles with bigger packs, so if they found a larger pack that was on an iron-based chemistry and could sell these vehicles with around the same range that they're at right now, again, in my opinion, that max range number, whether it's 260 or 320, doesn't really matter all that much. As long as you got 250 kilowatt charging and you can access the supercharger network, which obviously they can, these things are still going to be great at road tripping. I've been watching lots of content creators post about their experience with the 4680 Model Y, and even though it's not the fastest charging and it has under 300 miles of range, a lot of people can comfortably travel across the country with it, no problem. And while I don't think the market is huge for it, I definitely think there's a ton of people out there that may be buying the Model S and X and not necessarily do a ton of road tripping with it, you know, maybe the occasional drive 2 or 3 times a year, but the vast majority of charging for most people is still done at home. And there's still some people who are doing the charging at home but would like a more luxurious interior with that panoramic windshield and the falcon wing doors and the bigger display and the ventilated seats and all that. So someone who doesn't really care all that much about the range but would appreciate having those more luxurious features, heck yeah, I could see a lot of people opting for these. I'm curious if any of you out there have already placed your order for one or are thinking about it, but personally, I'm very curious to see how this affects their inventory levels, and if there is no difference in the battery pack capacities, I could see a future where Tesla introduces these standard range Model S's and X's so that they can get the lease payments really low, and then after the 3 years go by on that lease, they can then turn it into a long-range Tesla and then sell it on their used inventory page, probably still at a profit after they've raked in all of that lease revenue. There's all kinds of things they could potentially do with these. It's still kind of funny to me that they call them standard range, even though Tesla doesn't use that terminology on the Model 3 and Y. Those are both just rear-wheel drive or all-wheel drive. Why do these get to be called standard range? And why does the Model 3 and Y get the term long range and the Model S and X just doesn't get any long-range terminology? It just becomes Model S or X. All kinds of great questions that I'm sure you can speculate along with me in the comments below, so feel free to share your thoughts. And thank you to everybody supporting this channel directly. Seriously, helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos. So thanks again. Have an excellent rest of your day.